What's up, everyone? Today I am joined by pokeaimMD. For those that somehow do not know this man, he is easily one of the biggest PokeTubers and streamers to do it. One of my personal favorite showdown players to watch. In addition to having an extremely solid tournament history, I invited him to talk to me today about using underrated threats in team building, because he is, of course, no slouch in that department either. I'll throw up some links for some of his team building guides right here if you want to check them out. But hey, that's enough of me talking. Joey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. What's up, everybody? Now, if this goes up after the one with BKC, just know that's the guy to watch, not me. And then the team building video is actually me and him. So
that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's a great video. It's a bit of a watch, but absolutely worth it. But hey, as I said, do not go comparing yourself to BKC, because I am sure you have lots to provide, especially on today's topic. But anyways, thanks for joining me today.
Of course.
My first question to start off is pretty simple though. But do you enjoy team building? Because personally, I often worry that a lot of newcomers to Pokemon get kind of stressed out by the whole thing. They might, steal someone else's team or kind of rush their own builds because they find it so overwhelming. Where do you come down on that?
It truly depends on the format I'm playing. When it comes to singles, I only like building when I'm really inspired, and the builds I do have to be unique. Like that's like what really inspires me. One of my favorite teams in like Pokemon Black and White, for instance, was this Archeops Focus Sash Endeavor lead with like Scarf Scizor, a Calm Mind, Leftovers Latios with HP Fire, because nobody expects Leftovers Latios to have HP Fire, and like a Hail Mammal Swine so I could beat Sun. So I really have to be like inspired and want to do something like that. And again, with this generation too, while I prefer taking teams from other people, if it comes to Draft League, though, I love building because you can just mess around with sets and whatnot. So I personally prefer the play to the build, but there's just something about making a team that actually works. It's just like, it's like, wow, it's beautiful.
Well, that's funny you mentioned that, because I was just thinking this morning how it's interesting how you think of a lot of fighting games, for example, and there's kind of like a bunch of creativity or expression to it, an aggressive player will be demonstrating their gameplay by playing aggressively. But that doesn't exist to the same extent in Pokemon, I feel like, except in team building. In team building, I think there's so much room for creativity and there's so much room for unique builds, and I definitely agree with that. It's a very unmatched way to play the game, really.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely argue to play more calculated or more risky, but at the end of the day, it's always calculated risk either way, even if you're playing aggressively, I think, in Pokemon too. So I agree. Creativity in team building, that's where you'll find the most creativity in Pokemon itself, just because there's so many, even with the limited decks we have now, there's so many you can use. And like even then, like even if you're using standard movesets, having custom EVs, that's the big thing as well. We have so much to play around with: nature, EVs, moves, items, like there's and of course Pokemon choice. There's so much things we could do here.
There's so much.
I agree.
Exactly, the minutiae in particular. Well, that's great, because that leads us to my next topic, which is how do you build around an underrated Pokemon? I ask this because I think it's easy for new players to get caught up in the tiers and the viability rankings and whatever, when really they just want to play with their favorite Pokemon, which I think is fair, but we're all playing this for fun at the end of the day. So what's your process when you want to build a team around a lesser used or maybe an underrated Pokemon?
So you mentioned a really good thing that I think has a lot to do with that. If you don't play the tier as much, the viability rankings obviously give you an idea of what people say is great in the tier. And part of building with a lesser used Pokemon, let's take the example of Toxtricity, right? Let's say I wanted to build around Toxtricity. The reason I'm choosing Toxtricity is if I look at the Sword and Shield, Sun and Moon, the Sword and Shield OU ranking list, I see Clefable at S+ rank, I see Corviknight at S-, and then I see Pokemon like Toxapex in A+ rank, right? Toxtricity has the
dual stab, yeah.
Exactly, the dual stab. It has the I was trying to say a different word for it, not necessarily dual stab, but it does have the dual stab. It has the coverage, as you mentioned, and it can also like absorb toxic spikes. So like that's like a mon that you might not see all the time in OU, but definitely can be a viable pick. It's actually even rated C+. I just see right now on the viability ranking. So I think that knowing the tier has a lot to do with being successful with a niche pick. And sometimes you don't want to play the tier forever, and sometimes you're also stuck. Maybe let's say if we're talking in terms of showdown ranking, maybe you're stuck in like the 12 or the 1100s to 1200s, 1300s, which is completely fine. But you still want to try and use your favorite, which let's say in this case is Arcanine. Let's say your favorite Pokemon is Arcanine. Sure. And you still want to try and use it. Maybe you're just trying to use Arcanine wrong, right? Maybe you're using offensive Arcanine with like a Life Orb, close combat, Flare Blitz, Wild Charge set, and you just keep getting walled by like Hippowdon or defensive Como and things like that, when maybe a defensive Arcanine with like Will-O-Wisp, Heavy Duty Boots, and Teleport could give you so much more. Not only giving you momentum, but like burning threats that I mentioned, Hippowdon and Como, because you burn them, they're basically dead. since their offensive presence is gone. So knowing the tier, and a lot of that just comes from the viability rankings. It really does help in terms of building.
I love that. And yet, I always say that maybe you see something in that Pokemon that nobody else sees and start a wave, you know? You mentioned Toxtricity,
Yep.
so maybe like, you know, the rankings are only based on perception, really. That's the problem, is it's a very unique form of forming a metagame where it's just uniquely perception and its usage. So it's just a matter of time till people see the lights on my amazing Braviary set, I always say. You never know.
I mean, that's how I felt before the Pokemon Home came out, and we got like, you know, Pokemon like Incineroar and Keldeo and Kyurem and Zeraora. One Pokemon that I thought was fantastic in OU was VANILLUXE, because with Taunt and Blizzard, first off, Kyurem wasn't around, so Clefable did not have to run max special defense. Like Specs Kyurem was not around, so Clefable did not have to run max special defense. And VANILLUXE has the cool thing of Blizzard 2 It's Corviknight, where it lives any hit. It has access to Taunt, so you can stop Roost, you can stop Toxic, you can stop Defog, and you have Freeze Dry as well to threaten Pokemon like Size Toad and Toxapex. So I really like that Pokemon in particular because it was able to threaten the common cores, because when a metagame starts to stabilize, which it was doing back then, before we got all these mods that made it even stronger and harder, and like Teleport Clef, before that became so centralizing, it's a lot easier to see what's able to use. I actually used it in a tournament, and I 6-0'd my opponent in SPL.
Oh, no way, I missed that. Holy crap.
I'll show the replay if you want, just so you can have it for later. But I 6-0'd my opponent.
I will plug that. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I think that's a very interesting point, is how the meta shakes up. And you pointed this out, and I always plug this, is that Sword and Shield is going to see so many meta changes over the course of its meta. Between the home meta and the DLC coming out soon, the second batch of DLC, there's going to be so much different metas going on. And whenever a new meta like hits, that's a great time to start trying some new stuff out and just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, you know? So
exactly,
that's a great time to test it out. But also, as you said, if you're going to be looking at this viability list and making decisions based on that accordingly, waiting until it stabilizes is also a very good period to try out some new things.
For sure. And just, I mean, like, one thing I like to do is just watch either random tournament games or just random ladder games to see what's using the ladder, because obviously this is a team building thing, but just a little tip for laddering. As you get higher up on the ladder, it's less about using something that's good and more so about counter teaming what people are using up there. Yeah. So yeah, like definitely getting to learn it. And as Nathan mentioned, we're about to have the DLC come out, so everything's about to shake up. Nobody's gonna know anything. I mean, if you look at the beginning of Sword and Shield, obviously with Dynamax it played a huge role, right? Like in the beginning of Sword and Shield, my top 10 Pokemon list, I still had Dragapult, I still had Dracovish up there, right?
I still had
up there, which
Galar,
I think I did.
what's its face?
Galarian Darmanitan, exactly.
Or the ghost type one. That's terrible now.
Corsola.
That's it. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, Corsola was still up there too. But I also had Barraskewda, because Barraskewda was a demon under Dynamax. Like it was really good under Dynamax. But once Dynamax got banned, Barraskewda's dropped down now to the RU tier. And then, well, they got banned from RU. But you've had those Pokemon go along, and it just the metagame has so many shifts. Pokemon Home came out, we had a different one, and like I said, and like Nathan said, don't be afraid. As much as waiting for a metagame is good to see what will work successfully, don't be afraid to just try out things and lose. That's a big thing too. Team building is more than just building your team of 6 and being comfortable with it. You gotta play, see what sometimes you gotta find out what you're weak to.
Find the cracks.
Yeah, you gotta find out what you're weak to, and sometimes you gotta adjust. Maybe you won't end up with the first 6 that you had originally, but maybe like you had a Gengar and you realize that Chandelure is actually better for you because your team is very weak to Corviknight plus like Toxapex, and you wanted or Corviknight plus like, I don't know, like, yeah, I guess Toxapex, whatever. Toxapex, and you wanted a ghost type that could actually hit harder than Gengar and afford to go modest even in this metagame, whereas Gengar kind of has to go timid because of its speed tier, whereas Chandelure can get away with going modest if it wants to. So it's more so about playtesting and figuring it out, and then just looking at the metagame itself. And we go a little bit more into detail in the team building video we have. Obviously, this is a pretty brief video.
Sure.
But yeah, you just metagame shifts so much, man. Like Hippowdon was UU a couple months ago, and now
that's crazy.
It's like top 10 in OU.
Well, personally, I find a great way, you kind of touched on it briefly there, but a great way to build around a lower tier Pokemon is to look for another one that covers some of its weaknesses. Whether it's like a Rotom Heat covering some of Flygon's bad matchups, or I don't know, like a Toxtricity covering up a weak fighting type's weaknesses, things like that. It's of course going to be offensive and defensive cores, which I do touch on in an earlier video, but do you look for these cores when you're team building?
I usually, when I'm building around them on, so I'll typically, like, the way I start building is I'll find a Pokemon I want to use, right? Let's just pick a random Pokemon. Like, I want to use Cramorant, right? Sure. And then obviously there's like the when I'm going from there, I try to look at what cores and OU can work with it that will help it achieve what it wants to do while covering its weaknesses, right? So obviously Cramorant's weak to, rock, electric, whatever. So I would something that comes to mind that can resist at least rock, maybe like Conkeldurr can be cool, and Conkeldurr can work with Cramorant because maybe Cramorant suffers with breaking through Toxapex, whereas Guts Conkeldurr with Earthquake and 2-hit KO Toxapex. So it's like looking at that and then going with those. I think a lot of people judge, like if you see a team, for example, where you see Corviknight, Clefable, Seismitoad, right? But if those Pokemon bring out the best in Cramorant, Toxtricity, Stonejourner, then use them. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing wrong with using non-standard Pokemon. If you're able to succeed with them, that's fantastic. But if the team will be better and you want to get results as well, don't be afraid to mix it up with standard until you find something like that can work from there.
Well, those like sorry, I was going to say those sort of basic shells can be so good for like adding creative Pokemon. I always thought the best shell for Black and White was Latios, Tyranitar, Ferrothorn, and Landorus. You could just slot in anything for those last 2 slots afterwards and just like make a really basic standard offense, and it could work for anything. And it's that same idea.
Typically you see a Rotom there too. So usually your last slot is what you want. I think in Black and White like is different, but for sure I agree with that shell. Yeah. So like it goes from there. Like and also a cool thing is that Pokemon, and this is a really cool thing about Team Building, like Pokemon shifts so much, right? Aegislash is amazing as a choice band and as a choice specs user, but a lot of people run Modest, which means that like some Komos run like 56 speed, so they outspeed Modest Aegislash, and they can 2-hit KO them with Earthquake. That's like the defensive Como. I started running Timid on my Aegislashes, and I'm outspeeding Komos and 2-hit KOing them, and I can tell when they're not faster than me by doing 64% to them versus the 52 to 54 that I would do with Specs Flash Cannon.
For sure.
Just because a lot of them take out from HP to put max defense, but they put a lot of speed because they want their body press to be as strong as possible, but they also want the speed. So like you can tell things like that, but like those are just little things that you see when you're playing the metagame as well and what you're able to adapt. If I want to use Zero Aura, maybe the best set right now is Bulk Up, Knock Off, Drain Punch, Plasma Fist, or Close Comet, whatever. But I see myself and my team losing a lot to Como or having trouble with Seismitoad. You could throw Play Rough and Grass Knot on your Zero Aura and test it out how it works. Obviously, you're going to have worse matchups versus other things, but it's all about play testing as well. Like, building is only the first part. Anything in theory or on paper can work, but when you get into the field with it, it's about how you use it.
It's adaptability.
So, yeah.
Not just the ability. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add, but I think it's going to do it for my questions. Thanks so much for coming on, man. For those who haven't already, make sure to check out Joey's YouTube, his Twitch, and of course Patreon at PokeaimMD. I'll throw up the socials on the screen here. But yeah, is there anything else you want to plug?
No, I mean, that's it. Thank you so much, guys. I really do love competitive Pokemon. I'm doing a road to top 10 on my YouTube channel probably in a month and a half.
Okay.
Or so.
There's the levels. I was doing road to top 500. You're doing road to top 10. That's the levels right there.
It's just more so just about consistent playing. But
Gotcha.
yeah, so I mean, if you guys like that sort of thing, feel free to subscribe. And I guess that's it. Thank you for having me.
Great. It's been a pleasure, dude. Thanks again.
Yeah, of course.